Hey everyone, so as we're doing these posters, and now we are on um, this week coming up, week 7. So now that you're sort of working on mixing and remixing these handmade posters that you have, and what I've done here, I'm going to show you some tactics to do this. But what I did here is, as you're seeing, I'm working on my desktop. We're going to move from the handmade to the digital. And that's always interesting. So I'm using Jenny's here for an example. So Jenny's here, Jenny's 5 off on the grid posters. I'm doing this before I see what you did with the off the grid posters, where you sort of, in essence, break all the rules. So now you can figure out a way that you can start creating a process to help you generate your final 5 posters. So one thing about this assignment is that these 5 posters are a family. So I want you to keep in mind that you're generating a series of posters that all live together, whether they live together, literally live together, or they're, for example, you can hang in different spaces, but you can, once the reader engages with them, they can see, oh, these all belong together. So for this assignment, ultimately, the final product, all 5 of them, you can either go fully digital, you could go fully handmade, you could go in between. And I'm also going to show you how to create motion. So when you see this week's content, you'll see these animated GIFs that I put as examples of animated typography, right? Some of you I know are interested in going into motion, so I want us to start experimenting a little bit with that, if that's what you see. So again, these posters, when we get to the finished ones, you can say the first one is handmade, the second and the third are a mix between the handmade. For example, you can make them by hand and then you can scan them in and then you can add the digital on top. Or you can say, I'm going to go all digital, and then the fifth one is all an animated GIF, for example, or a digital piece, right? We're going to work with GIFs because they're very easy to make, and I'm going to show you how to make them in another lecture, so I'm going to make it after this. So one way to do this remixing digitally once you bring it in. And just keep in mind, we're going to be working in InDesign for these. We're not going to be working in Illustrator. I will allow you to use Illustrator for some chopping and like ripping stuff apart if you need to, but a lot of that can happen in InDesign already. So one easy way to do this is you want to get used to working with layers, right? So make sure you have your layers. I'm using Jenny's as an example. So I'm just going to drop this in here. I'm just dropping it in there. This is literally just playing around. This is not about trying to be perfect. So I'm just dropping these pictures in there. And what's really funny is I made this document 8.5 by 11. I'm going to change the document size so that I can go for 11 by 17, right? So this is how large these posters are. So now you're just sort of like, you can resize them there and say, fit, object fitting, fit the content to the frame, so it enlarges it and fits it. That's one thing, right? Now you can play with that. So that's one poster. And again, this is just a tactic. This is not for you to be like, oh, this is how I'm going to make them. This is just one tactic of many, right? And then you bring another one in and you're going to just put it on top there too. Well, I think I just literally, sorry, that's not what I meant to do. I just meant to leave that one there, and then I'm just going to bring the other one in there. Just drop it to the side so it doesn't replace it fully, right? Now you have these 2 posters. One is on top of the other. So here's a simple thing to do to make them transparent. You can click here, go to the effects, which you can get if it's not out on the Windows effects, the effects palette, and make it multiply. It starts bleeding through. So you can see the transparency. And now, if you start to move these together, you start to see how you can perhaps start generating a revised composition, right? So you can start, ooh, there's something maybe there, right? And again, this is just eyeballing it, just playing around. You can also say, oh my God, wait, I want to really take this here, take that, and really enlarge that. Because I'm like, that G needs to be larger, right? And you can start to see how you can get the composition to start being activated. You could do whatever you want to these, right? Like it's not like that. They're different layers. They're actually not different layers. They're actually in the same layer. But what you're seeing the transparency is allow you to do that. So you can say, oh, let me flip this, see what happens if I actually flip. So what happens if I give, 2 different, it's read in two different ways, and you start going in this direction, right? And then there's those mergings. Now, one thing that you could do is, I'm just going to go back, which is Command Z in case you don't know that, but that's the shortcut to go back, right? Let's say that this is the composition that I want, right? And then I have another idea. It's like I'm going to, this G motif is going to repeat further, right? So, and again, this doesn't mean that this is where the things are going to be placed, but this is where you're going to start with your composition. So I'm going to say, okay, so I'm going to bring an axis line, just bring a guide out so that I know that this is where that big G goes. That's where I want to start, right? And I can start from there, right? So I can just type up a G, right? I'm going to type up a G. And I'm just gonna, for the sake of this, I'm just gonna use that Swiss Pro that we were using, Swiss International, and I'm just gonna go like, I'm just going 150. It's actually larger than that, so 250, right? That's one way to say, okay, so that's a text box, right? Now, I could make a copy of that if you hold the Option key and drag it, that makes a copy, and I can outline this as if I would in Illustrator, so it becomes a stroked vector. So that G, if I go to type, create outlines, that now is an outlined. That no longer is a letter that I can go in and try to edit. This is now an outlined piece of text, right? So if you hold the Shift key and drag the endpoint, it keeps the proportions together. If you don't, it starts stretching it, okay? Keep that in mind. So let's say that I have that and I have this big G and I'm like, oh, I want to put that big G there, right? In this case, I would say start a new layer. So you make a new layer that you can call, text. That way you can place things. I'm going to cut it out of that layer, and then I'm going to go to the text layer, double click on it, and then place it in there. And now you see the red endpoints corresponds to the red layer. So I can put it there. Because this is a vector, I can now start playing with it as a vector. Now, that doesn't mean that all this type you're going to do as a vector. I'm only doing the big elements, right? Because remember, you have to kern. You have to letter space, right? You can also say, oh, I'm going to take that line and be like, there's that good taste and perfect typography are super personal. That's, Swiss International, right? So then I'm going to just do, let's try 48 points. That's too large. I'm going to try 24, right? And then what I'm trying to figure out is this line here, right? Maybe it's too large. So I'm going to go to let's go to 18 points, right? And you start figuring that line there. So now if you turn layer 1 off, you start to see, I don't know why the type's yet, that I changed the typeface, right? So now you start to see the beginnings of that composition, right? Notice that the guides are on the layer 1, so you can move the guides to if you want to make a master guide layer, that's fine. But what you can do is you're using your images of your cut and paste as a guide to help you generate compositions by mixing compositions together. So therefore you're creating more intricacy within the composition itself, whether there are different voices, how to clarify. That doesn't mean that you, by the way, have to go ahead and do this mixing this way. You can perfectly clearly say, Jenny can perfectly say, I'm going to use this as my first one. It's a very clear hierarchy, right? And that's what I'm going to do. So you can use it as a basis to do it, or you can start mixing and seeing how intricate and how much you can clarify. So again, these posters, this is one way of working. You could do this all by hand and mix it by hand. Certainly there's examples of it that I showed you. I can take you back here to the weekly content. If I take you back here and you start to see the reading and resources from last week, which I put here, some Futurism from Futurism. This is a Cranbrook poster at Fella, right? And you get to, oh, wait a minute, that's not where it is. This is just inspiration. Here we go. I believe this is it, right? So, for example, these posters, Sarah made all these by hand. The student who made these was Sarah. She made all these by hand by cutting things, right? So this is all cut. This is a merge. If you notice, between the first week when we were doing the cut and paste and you saw a composition that had this big block of text like this, so she mixed these together manually. This is totally by hand. This is not computer made. And then I'm going to show you in this week, when you open it up, you'll see the final poster that she made, the version she made by hand. She made a version of it digitally, but the one by hand she literally took the one by hand and generated it digitally. One thing you want to know, and I'll show you how to do it now. For example, you can take this vector here. You can window, take out your objects and layout. There's the Pathfinder, which is similar to the one that you find in Illustrator. You can also objects and layout to the alignment tool, and they're both, you can use both of them. So for example, if I wanted to split these, right? So let's say that I have this G and I have another G and I put them together and I want to split, I can go ahead and start splitting. There you go. And it creates certain things, and I can then, ungroup it and start pulling things apart. Let me take it back just so I can do another thing, right? I can take and I can merge them, and now that's one symbol or one glyph, right? You can do all sorts of things just the same way you do in Illustrator, the same way with alignment tool. And sometimes I use the alignment tool to help me align things in unexpected ways, right? So I can take and start thinking, how do I'm just going to align all these, right? Start to figure out how do I align these together, or I want randomness, a little bit of randomness, right? All of that. So again, you could bring out from the window, you can use object and layout, you can use the alignment and the Pathfinder tool, you can use the transform tool. You can do pretty much all of that stuff here. The Pathfinder tool is really good when you're trying to cut through things, because there isn't really a cutting tool in InDesign or in Illustrator. They don't cut either, right? So here's like chunks that I just cut randomly, right? So if I have a G and I say like I'm gonna make a big line here, right? And I'm just gonna give it a big, like a 60-point stroke. And then I just wanna, oops, not the cutting. Sometimes you have to play around. It's probably because it's a line, right? So I could go ahead and type an I here, for example, or an L, right? Let's type an L here. I can vectorize it first. Object, type, and create outlines, which vectorizes it. Now I have this vector, and I need to bring it into the same layer. Just remember that, because otherwise, oops, I didn't do that right. So take this out of the blue layer, and I want it to be on the same layer as this red character. Once they're on the same layer, you can then go ahead and start playing some magic here. Let's see. Right, so there you go. So now I can take that. If I ungroup it, object, should be ungrouped, although sorry. Take that, and you can start playing with the endpoints. I just cut it out, and now I'm pasting it in. So now you're developing little chunks of it. So you could take that and say this little guy, which looks like a really interesting piece, but you can just do this, right? Exit out of there, paste it separately. So now you have all these little bits and pieces, right? Which you can start then possibly playing around with, right? Seeing what starts to happen. Perhaps I'm just gonna, put in here, and then I could take that layer off, and then I'm starting to see the creation of this new poster, right? I'm gonna also, just so you know, because what the typefaces that you used in these posters, I'm gonna send these both to you via email, but you did not get this from me. So I'm gonna send you this particular typeface, which is called Antique, and this is called La Riche. Okay, so you can use these in your digital typesetting. But again, you have to remember these typefaces are somebody's legal work, and I'm giving them to you just for the purpose of doing these assignments. So again, this is a lot of playing around to generate these digitized posters. And once we start digitizing the posters, whether you do it digitally or whether you do it by hand, I want you to start thinking about the spacing, the kerning, the tracking, the leading, the relationship of the elements on the posters as you're working through. That's key. You are still working with dummy copy. We got one more week of working with dummy copy, and then you will be replaced with the actual copy that you select from the essay that you found. But these 5 posters, again, you're thinking through the ideas of the subject matter you're talking about to generate these compositions. And again, that doesn't, one other thing I want you to keep in mind is that what you made by hand, once you start mixing and once you start getting digital, you can still edit as much as you want to, right? But I want you to keep in mind that a lot of this is about developing your relationship to the typography and the typographic forms and using them in space on a piece of paper, in a physical space, the web, digital, however it is. All right. So I will now going to do a little, oh, one thing that I want to say to you is just for the sake of helping with the GIF, right? So once you have your poster made, let's say this is the whole poster, right? And you want to do a GIF. One thing that you want to do, right, is you want to really think about what aspects of the poster you want to animate so that when you get to Photoshop, you save these layers individually. Okay, so for example, let's say that the only thing I want to animate this line. Actually, I want to animate this, the G, and this glyph, right? The rest of the poster will remain intact. There's only 2 things that are happening, 2 pieces that will create the animation. So what I want to do is, you can also work with layers here. So I'm going to make a layer 3 and move this. The parts that are not going to move are going to be on layer 3. Okay, so edit, I'm putting them paste in place so they're in there. So one thing that I want to do is I want to turn layer 2 off, right? And I want to save as, right? Or you can export just that part individually as a PDF. Each layer that you want to have different, you want to export. So in essence, each layer that you're going to animate, you need to export as a PDF separately in InDesign. So you'll have, for example, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, because that's the stuff that you want to animate. So I'm going to put layer 3, right? I'm just saving this on my desktop just to show you all, right? So I save that, and that's just, it's just one page. Okay. Now keep in mind this is also saving it at the actual page size, which is 11 by 17 in this case, right? And then what I do is I'll go to layers, the text layer that I had turned off, I want to turn it back on. And I apologize, my computer is being a little slow today. Let's see, come on. So you want to save layer, the text layer that's here, turn off layer 3 so that actually there's 2 elements on that page that you want to animate. So that G you would want to save separately, so you could call that as a g.pdf, and then there's that glyph that you would want to save separately because you want to think about animating those 2 layers. Okay, so with that said, I'm gonna jump here, and then what I'll do is I'm gonna do another lecture to show you how to do GIFs in Photoshop. Like always, I am looking forward to seeing what you will do this week. I'm also looking forward to see what you did on your off the grid posters. See how bonkers you went. I'm doing this before those are due tonight. So, you know, like always, let me know if any questions. I know some of you have emailed me, and if I haven't emailed you back, please bug me, but I'm pretty sure I emailed everybody back that emailed me, and I've talked to some of you, and I would love to talk to the rest of you. Okay, I'll talk soon.